let's go and do it. All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is week 4, part 2 of our broadcast. Last day we talked about an intro to JQuery, and we're going to continue with that. And what we're going to do today is we're going to convert part of our script in our app.js into JQuery and see what the advantages and disadvantages are. All right, so let's take a look at that. So again, we're sitting at week 4. Again, I've released lab 2. So just to remind you guys, release lab 2. Lab 2 will be due on week 7, which is after our mid-semester break, and that's a good thing. And then we're also going to have, like I said, ICE 3, which is due today. So that is, you know, something that we're working with all together. In terms of, you know, our everything that is kind of happening today. So notice that we're saying jQuery, 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 like I said before. What's going to happen is some of this, you know, the jQuery stuff, I'm going to give you a lot earlier to give us a chance to hit Ajax a little early as well, because next week, as an example, so this is like week 4, but by week 6, you should know enough about jQuery in order for you to answer that, to do the test well, right? So that's what we talked about. And we don't really hit Ajax officially until week 8, and I think that's really late. So I'm probably going to, you know, back up and get you guys to do Ajax a lot earlier. So, and the reason for that is because it becomes more interactive. So my thoughts are probably a lot closer to week 6 than, you know, hitting us on week 8, because if I'm not wrong, test 3 is around Ajax anyway. All right, that's just the way the flow is. We talked about what jQuery was. We talked about features of jQuery last time, and those kind of things. And then we kind of ramped into selector syntax, how you select stuff, and we talked about how the ready handler is just not the same. And there's a lot of stuff that we noticed that was deprecated, and we noticed that this is a way of doing the short way for jQuery, for producing an IFI, kind of, but it's not really an IFI that we noticed before. So we're going to talk about the next phase, which is how do we add basic filters, and how do we do that? What are filters? Today we're going to talk about things like, okay, when I want to, anything with a colon afterwards, as an example, just like it would be in CSS, you can use filters to further help you select items on the page. And a good example of that is I want to look at all list items, elements that are the first child of their UL, as an example. That's a good example of that. Or I want to look at all table rows that are even numbered inside of a table, right? That's how it looks. You know, when you look at this selector syntax, that's what it means. Okay, or I want to look at all input elements with text as an attribute. Okay, so text type instead of telephone type or something else, right? So those are the things you can do with filters. Okay. So I want to be able to do that, but what I want to start with is, can I change some of the attributes that I already have in my code? So let's get into that. By the way, welcome, Scott. How about that? There you go. Yeah, so like I was saying, I was just skipping through the PowerPoint here, and I said filters with a colon, and you can see there's different things here. And then what's happening is we talked about first child, list item of first child, even rows inside of a table, and then all elements, input elements that are text. And then what I'm saying is there are other jQuery methods we're going to hit right now, which are these ones, common ones. Now notice like there's 80 pages on this PowerPoint, so you're going to probably see elements of this PowerPoint next week as well, because all I'm doing is I'm going to continue to to go through jQuery one step at a time. And this PowerPoint has pretty much everything you need to get you going. All right, so let's get into the code. So where last we left off, and again, if I go to Control backtick and I run light server, then we're going to get into this. This is where we are right now. And again, if I inspect the page and if I look at application, and I'll be right back. I'm just going to close my door. Sorry about that. There we go. Yeah, so as we looked, we're looking inside of here, inside of our application tab on inspector. We can see that there's several things. I've added extra ones. And kind of we can do that in here. So we want to try and convert as much as possible things. Now it says if there's something that is not loading, right, as an example, and that's okay, right? So we have this button that's showing that is being output, right, in the console. We got to find out where I did that. Welcome, Arvin. So let's do that because we don't need that little output. And again, easy ways to do that is we can kind of search for it. So we can go find console. So there it is, console error, right? We know that is one where it's in the contact. How about in our app? So let's find console in our app. You can see that here's our mouse over. We did this, and there's our button, query selector all. We did this little check last day. Because I wanted to show you what it was like to use an event as an example on a button. And you can see that we're looking for a button and we looked for any button, and the first button we found was the hamburger, which is like the thing that happens when you close things up. So we're not going to do that right now. So let's get rid of this part. This is what we had last time. Okay, so let's just delete some of this stuff. There we go. And we're back up to this with display home. All right, so what I want to do for this lab, this in-class exercise, is I want to scroll down to where it says display contact, and I want to talk about converting all of the stuff in my display contact method, right in here. I want to change all this into JQuery, and let's see how we can optimize. Now again, I'm going to talk about positives and negatives here. All right, so let's think about this. So the way jQuery works again is if I want to select an area like the message area, it's pretty simple. I can just go here and just say something like, hey jQuery. That's the first thing, hey jQuery. And then I want to find an ID with message area. I want to find an ID with message area, okay? Because that is the hashtag, just like we would normally use for CSS. This is the way we go, right? But I can do it without a variable at all. So instead of looking for like storing this reference into a variable, I don't have to do that. Instead, hashtag. Hashtag means ID. Again, back to CSS. If I by the way, if I went like this and if I put a dot, that means class, right? This is ICE3, Arvin. ICE4 is next week. Remember, we were 1 week back from in-class exercise because we were on week 4, so we're ICE3. So yeah, so this is hashtag message area. Message area means, hey, let's find an ID, all items with an ID of message area. Cool. All right, cool. What I want to do is I want to hide these items. And this thing right here is the same as doing both of those two lines. Okay, so this little thing. Again, you might say that this is really cool and it's awesome, but readability wise, again, I think it's a little bit less readable, than this, right? This is, hey, I got a message area. I want to get element by the message area ID. right? And I want to turn the message area into a hidden item, right? Whereas this, I'm selecting it and hiding it right away. Different way of doing things, but it's the same effect. Okay, so all right, let's uncheck this, or let's comment this out. So again, just to show you that it still works. So we're going to say just comment that part out. We can't comment this part out because we're using the message area down in here right now. So we'll just do one step at a time as we convert over from JavaScript to jQuery. So if I go back and I look at let's look at our list there. And if I go back to our contact page, and if I go T and then I kind of tab over, right? Notice that my effect where my message area becomes shown, right now is not functional, right? That's an issue, right? Because like we said before, it should give me some feedback that something's wrong, right? So up here, there should be a little message area that pops up. And again, if you want to see that, let's view the page source. So at the top, there's a message area that's got an ID of message area, and right now it's hidden. Right now it's hidden. So what we want to do instead, and let's just go to localhost. What we want to do instead is when I kind of tab over, we want to show it. So message area hide, yes, it did it, but now when I want to make it false, I need to do the same kind of thing. I have to say something like, hey, message area, instead of hiding it, let's show it, right? Let's show it. So the way that would work is we can put the show instead of hide, and we can get rid of this. So we don't need this part anymore because that hides it. Let's see if we can show it when it meets these requirements, which is when we do form validation. So there we go. There's how it's hidden. So we have to kind of pair those together, right? So that's hiding and showing. Okay, hide and show. And that basically all it does is it adds a a block comment so we can see it, and this is just hidden in CSS. Okay, that's what it really does control in many ways. Okay, so that is hiding and showing, and then of course we want to hide it again because if we have everything good, we want to start with hidden, but we want to hide it again when everything is good. So again, if everything is bad, we show it, but if everything is good, we hide it, right? And that's what we talked about last time. So hiding and showing, we can do this with JQuery. Again, we're converting for those who are coming in a little late. We're converting. We're back on the last project we were working with last day, and all I'm doing, I'm in the display contact area, and I'm converting everything that's in the display contact function into JQuery, one step at a time, and to show you what this can do. All right, what about I want to add my class name of alert danger. That's giving me the the look, the red kind of outline for my div tag. So how do I do that? So again, I can say, hey, message area, let us, instead of class name, right? So what I want to do, if I type in class, right, then I can say add class. Here's add class. And add class I have to put in the kind of the class that I'm adding in. So this is kind of what I want in there. And then I can get rid of this. And for my text content, what I can do is I can say, hey, jQuery, give me a message area. Here's my message area. And I want to change the text, right, to this. So that's how it works. So all this gets put into there. Again, same kind of thing. The difference is that we're using jQuery on one hand so far and JavaScript in the other way. So far, so good. Also, message area, remove attribute class. I want to remove my class. So how do I do that? So again, if I said something like, hey, message area, if I type attribute, So there's attribute and then there's remove attribute, right? I can also say remove class, right? So I can remove the class that I put in if I wanted to do that, but let's use remove attribute. Remove attribute, and I want the class attribute to be removed. That's exactly kind of what we're seeing here. Let's do that. So that will do everything we want to do. So it basically will remove the attribute so it doesn't become red anymore when we come back to this page. All right, so that's kind of everything we've done with the message area. And if that's cool, because there's nothing else here for message area, we can erase this part right here, which is our declaration for message area. So let's get rid of this too. And now you can see we're getting a little bit, closer, smaller. This is what JQuery does for us. Okay. So let's get back to this. So again, if I go to here and I go to T and I kind of tab in, I see the message area in there as inappropriate. And then I go here and I'm back to normal. So it does everything that I wanted to do. All right. So again, you can clearly see that what we've decided to do here with jQuery is just eliminate or reduce what we already have. Okay, now for full name. This is going to be a little bit trickier. Okay, so full name is still get element by ID full name. So let's start with that. So again, I'm going to say something like, hey, jQuery, I want to get an ID of full name. And what I want to do here is I want to set the blur events. So I could type blur, but notice that it is deprecated. Anytime you see a cross out like this, that's a good indicator that something is going wrong, right? That jQuery has updated and we've changed everything to look like a different way of doing things than this. So what it's asking you to do, and you can do a couple things, even click, as you can see, is deprecated. Click was deprecated. We needed to use the on, kind of method, and on or one. On means every time. One is only once, right? That's the options that you have here in jQuery. So on one would only work one time if you want to some kind of event to only trigger once, right? Like a connection event or something. But let's do this. So we're going to say on, and we're going to say on blur, right? When we're on blur, then I want to do a function. And there's a couple ways to do that. I'm going to do it the shorthand way and talk about the problems around this. The shorthand way is to use our new arrow function, but there's a problem that we're going to run into with the new shorthand way. Okay, so this is the new shorthand way of doing this. So these two lines. Okay. But let's do that. Let's take all of this code right here now, cut it, and put it inside of here. And you're going to say, wait. Full name, we don't even have full name, right? How do we get full name in the first place? Like, where did we get that from? Okay, you're right. And let's get rid of all this. But does it still work is a question. So on blur, then we want to check to see if full name value length is less than 2. And remember, full name is because it's in the form, we're assuming that it's going to be, we're getting the name of the form element, which is full name, because I named it as well. So I did a couple things to ensure we get that variable. So if I go back now, and if I go T, and if I do it, it still works. Okay. So that is working. So it does full name on blur and this. What about focus and select, though? Focus and select, I'd have to kind of, pull for a full name again. So by default, I would probably do something like, hey, full name, let us do a focus. Focus is, deprecated again, right? Deprecation is a bad thing. So the way to do this would be, I want to trigger the focus event. We can listen for an event called focus. That is okay. If we want to listen for the focus event, if something gains focus, if something blurs, if something is selected, that we can do with the on. That's listening for an event. But if we want to trigger something to focus, then the new way of doing things is to type in the word trigger. So trigger, and then we say focus. And then what that does is it adds the focus event. It triggers the focus event for full name. Okay, so that is gone. And similarly, select, if I try to do the same thing with select, so if I take this and kind of put that in there and then set something like select, you can see again that select is deprecated, right? So what we would do is trigger select. So that is the way we would do it. Okay, and let's get rid of this. Again, bear with me as we work through this. So this is how we do this, but how the heck is this working? This full name, value, length, less than 2. Well, we're assuming it's going to work. First of all, let's go back and see what's happening here if this works. So go back, if I go T dot, and then it's not going to work, right? It works totally fine. And this works the same way that we did it before, and it does the focus and selection. So these two lines right now are functional. What about this one though? I want to guarantee that this is going to work. I'm just going to put this on the next line because that's my coding style. I want to guarantee that this is going to work. So how do I guarantee it? Well, I need to code it something like this. I want to say that, okay, hey, full name. This is what this is going to be here. And I want to say that val is the value, and then dot length is how we check it. So hey, full name, value length is less than 2, then this is how we check it. Okay, so kind of the same thing as we did before, and we see this kind of structure. So if I save it and go back, I go T, you can see still it's working the same way we expected it to work. Great. So this is the first iteration of the first part of our code, this form validation piece. Okay, questions around this? And here's a question for you. Do you see any problems with any of this stuff? Beyond the readability, right? So I'm saying, hey, full name, select full name and then do something. Select full name and then trigger. Select full name and then this. The readability is a little bit less, I would say, than regular JavaScript. But there's a problem here that I want you to think about for a second. What's happening? What is actually happening when I'm doing this? Okay. A little bit of a problem. I don't like it. What's happening? I'll come back to it in a sec. I'll let you think about it. All right, so how about this part? So this part is easy, right? Nick says, is it that you click on and try to click off it disables the other text boxes? No, that's not the real problem. Let's go in here. If you don't type at all. Well, that's a different thing altogether, but yes, let's go into this one for now. So send button, just like before, I would do, hey, send button. So I want to get an object that has an ID of send button. That's normal, right? And I can't do click because click is deprecated. So send button dot click, not a good thing, right? And I need to use jQuery ahead of time. So hey, jQuery, I want to find an object or element that has a send button. If I type click, click is deprecated, but I know I can do on click, which we've said before. And then I can put in the fat arrow function that we used before to create our event listener and handler combination. Listener, handler in here. All right, so that's what we want to do. And then that takes care of all of this, right? So then all I need is this part. So I can cut this part and put it in there, and we can get rid of all of this. So this is the first step into making our class fully jQuery. Now, there's really nothing I can do here because this is a class, and I'm using the contact class, a custom class that we defined. jQuery can't help us with that. And jQuery can't help us serialize our contact. That is something that we've done, so this remains. This is still JavaScript. Local storage, jQuery doesn't help us with local storage, so this is the same. So none of this is going to change, just the selector syntax up here. All right, well, let's see if this works. So I need to add a new contact, and let's see if this is working the same way. We can assume that it does because of the on click, but let's make sure it does. So again, I'm going to add another name, right? So Wanda is very popular these days, Maximoff, right? And her contact number is, and it's, Scarlet Witch at example.com, right? And I want to, let's go into our application to make sure that it works. I've got a bunch of names here. I want to send, which should add Wanda into the mix. There it is. And if I go show contact list now, we should see Wanda's name down here. There it is. All right, so there we go. So we got a nice list of names. Again, whether you have this many names or not, it's okay, right? You can, look, I got 2 people with the same phone number. I guess they answer the same number, right? But this is a problem, right? We're going to go back and fix this. Maybe I'll make her name, work with 2. And we can fix that here. If there's a problem with your example code, you can always go here and right click and edit the value. So let's say, for example, I change the value to 3, right? Then if I go back and refresh the screen, now you can see that the value is changed. So you can do that on the fly with inside of your application. All right, so we got a good example here of contacts and a bunch of superheroes and me. I'm in good company here with all these other superheroes. But, so that is what we've done, and that kind of works. But we've got all of this working, and let's put this up on GitHub as our first iteration. Okay, this is our first iteration. So again, I'm just going to add another thing here. And for GitHub, I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say converted pretty much all of display contact function to jQuery. Yeah, that's what we did, and then git push. So that is part of in-class exercise 3, guys, converting into jQuery, right? Why? Because this way you're starting to use jQuery. If I just let you use JavaScript, JavaScript is fine. And in fact, most of the times I prefer to use JavaScript over jQuery because it does the same thing, and I don't have to use a library. I don't have to depend on JavaScript or jQuery being installed on my system for me to do the same kind of things I can do here with jQuery. JavaScript is just longer, which is okay. What line of code is clearing the text boxes on the send button? None of it. The send button's default behavior clears the text boxes. All right, so remember, because the send button is, if you look at it, if you look at the contact.html, the send button, right, is of type submit. Because it's of type submit and it belongs to a form, then HTML, the browser, sees every time I click, by default, the send button, it will clear and submit the form. And the one thing I don't have in my form, which we'll have later on this semester, is forms can have other attributes like the method. Is it a post method? Is it a get method? What's the URL? What's the action that you do after the form? All those things you can have up here. Right now it doesn't go anywhere. The form is just something we can test with. And it's not really functioning, as in it doesn't do anything. It doesn't go anywhere. But I could make it go somewhere. I could make the form bounce to or send a post request or a get request to a backend. I could do that. All right, so that is our basic code for this. But we want to do some improvement. We can do better. Okay, we can do better than this. Because jQuery, one of the great things that jQuery has as advantages is jQuery allows us to do something called method chaining, which you've seen before in other languages. So example, hey, look, I'm doing full name trigger focus. Let's do full name trigger focus trigger select like this. So, right, we use the dot accessor method to add 2 triggers at the same time. One for focus, and then after focus is completed, then do this one. That's what this means. Okay. And the reset button acts the same way. No, the reset button is different. Sorry, just to answer the question. So I asked 2 questions. One is, how come the form clears when you press submit? Well, what's actually happening, what should happen is submit actually submits the form and sends the data, right? That's what it should do. Cancel, right? If you look at the cancel button on the contact form, so if you scroll down to the cancel button actually does resets. That's the type that it does. So reset doesn't submit. So that's why both seem to do the same thing right now, because submit doesn't really do anything for us right now. And it kind of rejigs the page. It actually refreshes the page as well. So this is kind of sends everything and refreshes the page. That's what submit does. Reset doesn't do that. Reset actually goes through and clears the form. So those are two different things that it does. And it doesn't send any information. That's why those two buttons are different. Okay. Well, let's get back here. All right. So we've done method chaining. This is this part. So trigger and then trigger. And we can do this. Let's see if this works. So again, I'm going to go back to our page, go to my contact, and I want to go T dot. And then again, look at that. I can select or I can focus and select at the same time. Okay, focus and select. And that happens all with one line of code, right? Well, if we can do this, can we do this? What do you think? The answer is yes, right? So if we do this, we can do this, right? We can kind of select stuff. And then, you know, you can see that that totally works the same way because I'm getting this message and I'm doing it all in one line. All right, so that is another line that I've saved, another line of code. By the way, really what's happening is I'm not saving anything. I'm just accessing this. But there's a great savings. There's a great saving that's going on, guys. I'm only selecting once. I'm only selecting once. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to select more than once. Because every time I select, it is going through the page again and going through and looking at every element on the page to find it. And this is why this is very wasteful, to do two selections, right? We don't want to do two selections. We didn't do that with JavaScript. Why would we do that with jQuery, right? So that's why method chaining is a thing as well. So again, I want to make the remove and then hide. I can totally do that by doing this. Let's just do, this is called algorithm improvement is what we're doing here. Okay, a little bit of algorithm improvement. And now there is something else that's going on here. All right, so again, just like before, I'm selecting three times. That means I'm looking through the entire page three times. That takes a lot of cycles. And for some browsers, this can be pretty slow. For example, in some areas where internet is not super fast, like we have most places in the world, there might be some areas that this takes an extra few milliseconds to do. And a few milliseconds here, a few milliseconds there means less responsiveness for the web page, and that's bad. So we don't want this. We know what this is. This is the element that we're hitting on. And I want to take the element that I've already selected that element and get the value of that element. I've already selected this element and then focus on that element. So how do I get the element that I've already selected inside of my function? Well, there's a way of doing that. So here's the way that it would look in jQuery. jQuery would say, hey, I want to get this context. And let's print the value that I have in here. So let's look at my HTML that's inside this. I want to print the HTML out. So console log. This is what I'd like to do, right? So I want to look at all the HTML that's inside contained in full name. Okay, let's console.log out and see what I get. And if I go to inspect and console, what? So T dot, and I get undefined. Why? I mean, what this refers to, right, is everything that's inside of this function, right? It actually refers to the calling or the selected item. This refers to full name. That's what it's supposed to refer to. But it doesn't work. Well, it kind of does work, but guess what we're doing here? We're using a fat arrow function, which plays around with the context that's in here. It's actually a binding context already to do this kind of stuff, right? Actually, this context, if I use the fat arrow function, is actually this context, the context that's in the display contact. And the display contact has no HTML, right? HTML is undefined for the display contact function because that's what this does. It allows us to carry forward the context of this function inside of here, okay? So we don't lose context. We don't want this, so we can convert this back to a non-fat arrow function. And if we take the fat arrows away, and if we just press save and go back and try it again, now we're going to get some kind of response. It's not empty, but we're getting something now. And how about we look at the value, right? If I say value of whatever's inside a full name, right? So if I do the value, and if I do T dot, here's T. So it actually is working. This $, this refers to this. That's what it refers to. So I don't have to re-poll. I don't have to go and search again 1, 2 more times through the entire page. I don't want this. I want to improve my performance. And the way to do that is to take this little piece here and put it and replace this little piece here. So I want to say, hey, this value, so full name value, and hey, I want to also replace this trigger, right? This trigger, because this refers to the full name that I got. That's what it refers to. So now this is the final version. So I'm not polling more than once every time I do a message area. Now I've got the message area here, and I got the message area here and here. So theoretically, we could even improve this even more, right? So the way to do this, again, because what this is returning, if you notice, is a number. It returns a number. And notice it has a number or fast. Let's go back to this. If I hover over, it says hide, returns it says my duration, how long I want to hide, how fast I want to hide. I can put an optional number in there, or I can say fast or slow, right? Or I can put in some kind of callback function. Okay, that's what I can do in here as well. So what I can do is I can say, I want to hide this message area, but I want it to take some time, right? So when I select, when I show the message area, I can do the same thing. I can say in my show method, there's more that I can do. This is why JQuery is pretty cool. In the show method, instead of passing nothing, it's a parameter, I can pass in a value. Like, for example, let's pass in like 3,000. Yeah, let's see what that does. So 3,000, and go back. And then if I go T dot, it's going to take its time, right? But it's going to come up in about 3 seconds. All right. So that's what 3,000 does. It's 3,000 milliseconds. And I can do the same thing. I can hide it in, let's say, 1,000 milliseconds. So I can do that. I can say T dot, and then it comes up in about 3,000 milliseconds. Look at that, this is coming up. And then if I put in the right thing, it'll hide it in about a second. So I can kind of do that show and hide, kind of thing with some timing. Or I can put in the keywords fast and slow. I can do that too, fast and slow, to show and hide. So again, I can go T dot, it shows it, still a bit of a delay that you see. It's the effect that you want. And then it'll slow it down, it'll hide it the same way. So show and hide can have parameters, is what I'm showing here. But, right, if I look at hide as an example and what it returns a JQuery object collection. That's what it returns, a JQuery object collection. This whole thing is what it returns. It returns a JQuery object collection. That's what it does. And it has duration. You can also check to see if when it's complete as a function call. You can put in additional options for mapping. And they give you a lot. If you scroll down here for what jQuery gives you, it gives you a whole pile of information on how things can work. Take a look at that. It's like a lot of examples, like right here. So I'm hiding it, I'm clicking it. I can prevent defaults, right? I can prevent defaults right here, right? I can scroll down and you can see that it even gives you examples of, like quite a bit of examples of code that you can see for slow, right? Hiding slow when I click on it and so on. So that is kind of how it works. So pretty cool what happens, but I'm getting back some kind of jQuery on the way back. So if I said something like let message area, like I did before, equals to this, the meaning is not so good. It does the hide, right, as an example, but what gets stored in here is a jQuery object of type element. That's what gets stored back in here, okay? So, I mean, if I want to save doing something like this down here, there's not really much of a savings, right? I mean, I'd have to kind of go here, and I could try it. Let's see what happens. So if I said, hey, message area, I want to do all this, because this is I returned a jQuery element, what if I only have to pull once, is what I'm trying to say. So if I said message area here, dot show, and then message area dot remove attribute, this is what we'd like to do. Why do I like to do this? Because I don't want to pull more than once. Here is, I'm finding the object in the page once, and I want to not look at the page more than one time. I don't want to look through the entire page, you know, as an example, to select this item again if I can avoid it, right? And that's what this might allow us to do. Let's take a look and see what happens. So again, I will T dot, and I see the message area come up, and then if I put this in there, it goes away. And that, my friends, is how you do it. Because this returns a regular, so Nicholas says, won't you always be hiding the element first and cause milliseconds of inadequacy? Not really. This kind of, what this does is it actually gets this piece. That's why methods chaining works. It gets a reference to this piece, and that's how all this works anyway, right? How does this work? How does, you know, the jQuery pass on the method? Well, it gets it kind of returns a reference to itself to show. It returns a reference to itself to add class. It returns a method of its kind of a reference of itself to text over and over again. So if that's true, then this is the reference of the thing that I found, right? And I can pass this to the other functions. So this is kind of a way of doing it without polling more than once. And my friends, this is the final function, final way. Why? We've one variable that we reuse so that way we can improve performance. Okay, this is a performance improvement and reduction exercise. All right, so let's put this up on GitHub. So we'll say something like git add dot and git commit minus m, and we'll say algorithm improvement. That's what we've done. What do you think? So, so there's advantages and disadvantages of jQuery. I'm showing you the advantage. This is the advantage of jQuery. Advantage, I've taken a you know, kind of a function that was pretty long and JavaScript wordy, right? And I've converted it for you into something that you can recognize as jQuery. Really, if you think about this, I have 1, 2, 3 calls to find items on the page, which is exactly what I would normally do for JavaScript. So JavaScript would do the same thing, right? It would call, you know, it would look at the page a few times to get element by ID, element by ID, element by ID. So I'm doing it 3 times anyway, right? So that's one thing I can do. The next part is I'm using jQuery's convenience functions, so I can put everything in one line, trigger, as an example, show add class text, to show the almost like an action sequence. That's what this is, a sequence of little actions that jQuery is doing for us. First we show, then we add class, then we do change the text. We show it kind of an action sequence here, right? And the same thing goes when I remove attribute and I hide this message area. I can do everything in an action sequence. And I'm modifying this same reference over and over again. And we've learned also that if I don't want to call something that, when I'm moving from this, you know, to the next one, to the next line, I can use the this keyword. this keyword refers to our little function, which is something that I pulled with JQuery. So kind of really cool. I'm not going to change display contact list. I just wanted to do that effort with you once to show you the great advantage of what JQuery can do. And if I go back to the files, this is kind of what we've done here, right? So I've kind of done this. One thing that JQuery also does, which we haven't done yet, is this idea of a for each loop. So for each loops in JQuery, it's almost like, hey, I want to find every element on the page that matches the selector. And then for each element that matches the selector, I want to do something. That is, again, very, very, very useful for each element that matches that stuff. If I want to loop through each list item and modify each list item in a list, right? This is a great way of doing that. For each anchor tag that's inside of the image list, I want to do something, as an example. That's what this allows us to do. So again, these are the most useful methods. Nicholas asks, so it searches all tags for an ID of image list. Yes, you can have more than one. You're supposed to only have one, okay? Because ID is supposed to be for a single tag, and classes are supposed to be for multiple elements that can use a class. But ID is only supposed to be for one. Supposed to be. You could, and people do, put it for more than one thing. These are some common methods. Again, we don't use ready, unload, error, click, none of these anymore. These are all deprecated. I just want to put them out there to you because you're going to see them online as well. Remember, we're going to use on ready and then the handler afterwards. On ready, ready in quotations, not like the way it's written here. Mouse over, hover, all these things are good, but they are the new, we use the new on method. So we never use this way. This is deprecated, this is deprecated, okay? So that's why we don't do it. One is a way of attaching an event handler and removing it after one's runtime. So it kind of does that for you. And this is very good. We talked about trigger, what that does for us from an event handling perspective. And there's some event handling tricks and tips that we can use. What bind does is actually, and you're going to say, well, why do I need bind? Well, sometimes we need bind because we want to bind an event, as an example, to a named function. So that's when we can bind the click events to a main function, to a named function. That's what we do up here. All right. And that's how jQuery does it, but you don't have to do it that way. You can also just, make a named function do the same thing with the click event. So this is kind of, again, a little bit deprecated. But I'm showing you because you're going to see a lot of this online, and then if you see the thing that's crossed out, you know why, because all these are old. Okay, I'm not going to do animations and effects this week because animations and effects I'm going to leave till next week. There's additional things we can touch up on here. What I want to do instead with the extra time we have is I want to start looking at the contact list a little bit. And I didn't have a chance to do this with the other class because I ran out of time. But we have a chance to do this with you. So if I look at the contact list now, and I want to do contact list improvement, all right, I have the following things. I have an ID, full name, contact number, and an email address. And that's the header. So if I go back to my contact list now, and I see that this is the header that I have. Okay, cool, cool, cool. But what if I want to remove an item from the contact list? Okay, I should be able to remove. I should be able to edit, right? So I should be able to delete and edit items from a contact list. That's for sure. And also the way I entered the contact list, the items in the contact list is kind of really weird and wrong, right? Because contacts us shows, kind of sends a message to us saying, hey, by the way, I need this thing, help me out with something. That's what my little thing does. And I'm missing a message area, which is for you to do for your lab 1. I'm not going to do this for you, right? So that's why I left the message area, that one part for you to do in lab 1. And also I didn't do any kind of validation for lab 1 for contact number or email address. That is for you to do in lab 1, all right? There's more validation you can do. But let's talk about a couple things. So I want to talk about validation for specific things like contact numbers and email addresses to help us, right? And we can also talk about maybe some kind of checkbox that is something like add me to the subscribe to our contact list, kind of thing. Subscribe to my contact list. So when I click send, the only time it's going to add to my internal storage, right, as an example, is when I have a checkbox that's clicked. Okay, let's modify the page. So that's how it should work. So let's go back to our JavaScript and see how that works. So and our index.html. So we're missing a checkbox, right? So we've got an input here as an example, and we've got full name, contact number, email, and then we need a checkbox. So what does a checkbox look like and how does it work? Well, let's go to Bootstrap to give us some help in terms of coding it. It's going to look very similar to this, but let's see what it looks like anyway. So Bootstrap, hey, get Bootstrap. I want to get a checkbox. So I'm going to go to Docs and I'm going to go to Forms. And forms have different elements, right, in forms. So we can, again, I want to go into Overview for forms. And then there's checks and radios. Okay, checks and radios. And I want to get this, a checkbox. All right, so checkbox will be on and off. A toggle basically is what we want. We don't want more than one checkbox, just one for a checkbox. So it looks like this, an input with a class of form input type checkbox. Value is what it's going to be, the name, and we want to see whether it's checked or not. Okay, so by default, I don't want it to be checked. I want it to be unchecked. Okay, so that's what I want it to do. So that's the element that I want right there. Okay, let's scroll back, get back to this one, and let's start coding it like it should be. So div with a class of input-group, and then a class of mb-3, and then inside that, notice I have this part, which is a span that's going to show me this part here. I'm just going to copy this line here, and this part here is going to describe what this thing is going to be doing for us. We're going to say something like, subscribe, right? That's what it's going to be, subscribe. And then what I want to do after the subscribe is that input, right? So I can say something like, hey, I want to grab this checkbox, right? Put that in there. So there's my checkbox. Now, it also says checked, right? Let's not check it. So we're going to uncheck it, right? And we need to do the same kind of work that we've done in the past. So again, I need an ID for the checkbox. So we're going to say subscribe checkbox. That's what it's going to be called. Subscribe checkbox, right? That's the ID. Class we've got. Aria is for inclusiveness. It says email address, right? And describe by. Notice in the over here for Aria, we don't have anything. I'm going to leave it alone, right? As an example. And we also have a name for that's email address. This name is important because name basically is relating to the variable that we can use later on in our page. So we're going to keep this idea, and required or not. I don't think the checkbox should be required. Like, you're not going to be required to subscribe. So I'm going to keep required off, but I do want a name. And this name attribute, I'm going to put at the end here, is going to be the same name as the ID. Subscribe checkbox. Okay, so that's what it's going to be. So we need an element. Remember, first we need content, then we can modify the content. So this is how this is going to look on the form then, is it's going to look like this. But that doesn't look great, right? Subscribe, whatever. And we have a checkbox that kind of works here, but, do I have an ID twice? Do I? ID. Yes, I do. That's terrible. But the problem is that this span that we normally use is no good, right? The span is no good. Instead, what I want to use is some kind of label, right, that is put inside there, right? So a label, we have a for. So again, if I want to find an example of a form label in here. So again, we have some checkboxes. Here's an example of a form label. I like this because it says indeterminate checkbox, or whatever that is, indeterminate, right? And here we have a label that says default checkbox, right? And we have a label that says checkbox checked, right? So that's what I want. I want the label that's before the checkbox, and it's for that checkbox. So grab this label. Now notice it says that the checkbox is first and then the label, because that's the order that I put things. So the input first and then the label. All right, so let's put the label after. So input first, I like that. And then the label. And let's put this on one line because we don't need multiple things here. So see how that looks instead. And we'll say subscribe, subscribe to our contact list. Okay, and then this for should be the same as ID. And that's it. Let's see how this looks now. So going back to my contact, we'll say this, but oh man, what the heck? How come there's no spacing between this one and the other one? And again, what I'd want to do is put a little space here, but we don't have that. How come? What's going on here where we don't have spacing, right? Because in our example code, here's our example code, right? Well, one thing is the class div with the class of form check, right? And we have a div with the class of input group. So let's do that form check instead. So form check. And let's see what that does. Form check looks a lot better, right? Looks a lot better, but you know what? I would love to have a little bit of padding between our little checkbox and our send and cancel buttons. We don't have that right now. Padding. So I want to, here we go, right? This is now we can use some stuff. We can use CSS and to search for anything that has a, or actually it's margin. Anything that has a class of form check, and I want to have some kind of margin, right? But this is what this does, margin bottom 3. Let's add that in. So margin bottom 3. And now we have margin. That's what margin bottom is. Bootstrap has a little bit of convenience classes that we have. What about on the left? I want to kind of push this maybe a little bit, instead of it being in line like this. I mean, it's not terrible. I mean, it gives me my checkbox and I can do stuff, right? But the only time it's going to add to the list now is if what I want to do is when I click that checkbox. If the checkbox is not checked, then it's not going to add it to the list. It's just going to send me an email, all right? So how do I respond to this? By the way, what if I wanted some other kind of margins? If I said margin top 5 or something like that, is that going to do anything? And it does, right? It adds margin to the top. So that's kind of really cool that you can do these little margin top, margin bottom things, which will help you with a lot of stuff. 5 is like 50. 3 is like 30. 30 pixels. But it's relevant. It's relative to the page, which is pretty cool. All right, so that's what margin bottom and margin, and so it kind of creates spacing between everything. If you want more than this kind of spacing between each of the elements, we can certainly add those in. All right, so I want to hook into this now. So one is, let's create the content. We have the content. Nicholas says HTML doesn't read white space. It doesn't. It doesn't care about this, right? It doesn't care about the spacing that I have here. This is just for me when I'm coding, right? It just doesn't care, right? Except when sometimes it cares. If I put in a I tag in here where it says subscribe to our contact list, right? As a checkbox, let's say I was going to use some kind of font awesome font or something like that, then yeah, that would work. And same thing goes with half of this stuff, contact number, email address, all this kind of stuff, right? If I wanted to add in some additional information in here, right? As an example, let's say, for example, in my form, I want to add a little symbol for full name, contact number, and email address, just to, I don't know, spruce up my page or something like that. If I wanted to make these items the same length, right, so that they look the exact same or something like that, there's things that I could do here to make that happen. But let's continue. I want to just make sure that this checkbox works. So how do I do that in my contact page, right? So app.js, I'm going to do display contact, and now we need another effect. Okay, cool. So far I'm saying if the send button is clicked, then make a new contact. But the only way I want to make a new contact is not only is the send button clicked, but also that the check mark is on. So let's do that. So we're going to say something like, hey JQuery. Hey JQuery. I'm making a new symbol for JQuery. Hey JQuery, I want to look for my my subscribe checkbox. And I think I spelled it that way. Let's see if I did. I can't remember. Subscribe checkbox. Let's just copy it. Subscribe. Make sure that it's the same. Subscribe checkbox. I'm going to go back into this and just make sure I didn't have a finger typing error. Subscribe checkbox. There we go. So hey, subscribe checkbox on, and I want to say checked, right? On checked, right? That's what I want to do. On my checkbox checks. Well, I'm not getting any coding. This is the one thing I don't like about our JQuery, because I can't tell what the the coding is, but I could do something like an event listener to check it. So I say, if I did document.get element by ID, right, and I want to say that I want to search for the subscribe checkbox, right? I was going to do it in JavaScript native, and if I said add event listener to, and then if I say checked, it says changed. That is an event, right, that I can use. Queue change and can play through. But I don't see anything that's checked or unchecked, right? I'm just pointing this out because we want to select the right attribute. So let's suppose it is, instead of checked, first of all, let's see if this triggers, if it's checked. Let's see how smart it is. So we'll use a function in here, and just a regular function to see if it's checked, and I'll say a console log, because it's the first step. We do one step at a time, guys. Does the event listener work? If it doesn't work, then everything else inside of it won't work. So console log, right, checkbox checked. Okay, let's check and see if that's true. And what we're going to do is just comment this out for now, because we don't want extra stuff being added into our contact list for nothing. We can go to edit and we can say that we want to toggle block comment on, which turns this all on. So we just want this we're testing a new function, right? So we're going to go back here, and when we're here, I want to check the checkbox. And what I want to do is when I check the checkbox, right, the only way that it's going to check is here when I click send. So let's fill in some information and some contact information. But the problem is we're going to lose our information once I do this. Let's prevent defaults, right? Don't worry about the event. That's deprecated because we have the event coming through jQuery. We don't have to do this, but I'm showing you what it looks like. I can just put in prevent default, right? So again, we want to do this just for a second so I can go through. So 416 and Tom at is all I need, example. And if I check the box and click send, then, well, it sent it, didn't it? Right? It actually did the event anyway. And I got an error, right? If you notice, I got an error. It kind of flashed red for a second. Event.prevent default didn't quite work. So let's put the event in there as an example. And instead of event and then being here, let's put that event.prevent default. So I try that again. So again, we need to put that in there. So Tom and then just something that works, just so we can check. And what do we get? Well, nothing. It's not triggering this in any way, because checked isn't the right event. Okay, what about change, on change, checkbox checked? Let's try that again. So again, Tom, and then Tom at X, and then click the checkbox and check, and nothing. So let's look it up. I'm showing you this because you're going to have these issues, right? So checkbox checked event in JQuery. Let's do that. How do you do it? So how do you get the check state? True, false, yes. But let's take a look. If I want to get the checked event, how does it work? That's not the right thing. I want actually Stack Overflow is okay. It's been way back, so it'll work. Checkbox change, the change event, and I have a function. If this is checked, then do stuff, right? So, but I should just trigger. If I have a change, then it should work, right? So I did it right. But you know, it's not really triggering this on change event. So change is correct, right? And let's just do it so it's outside of the send button. So I'll copy this, or I'll cut this out and put it here for now. So we can trigger it outside of the send button, so we don't have to worry about the send button. Every time I click this, it should say checkbox checked or something like that, or unchecked. So that means if I go here and if I click this, then we can see it, right? That is the correct event. So on change, then that's good, right? But somehow, when I put this inside here, it doesn't work. Right? Because I did this last time. Here's what I did, right? And I put an event, and then there's another event. And then when I go through this and I try it again, so here it won't work because I haven't pressed the send button. Why doesn't it work? Well, that's it. It's not triggering, right? Because the only time it's going to trigger, it's only listening. And that's why we'd be forgiven to think that this is how it would work. But when my send button is actually checked or clicked, I'm not clicking this. I've already clicked this. So that's why we can't put it in here. Can't put this in here. So we need some kind of variable. This is how it should be. Let's put this all back now. All right, let's put this all back. We need some kind of variable in order for us to, to make sure that it's checked or not, right? Is it checked or unchecked, right? What is the state of my checkbox, right? And I want to check to see if that's true or not. So is it checked or not, right? And if I look at JQuery checkbox, right? This dot checked, I like how you're thinking, right? So it says, how do I check whether it's checked or not in JQuery? And again, we talked about it is if it's checked or get element dot is age selected checked or not. That is the JavaScript. That's absolutely correct, right? I want to click, and if it's this dot check, Nick, I like your thinking. Toggle, we can use toggle this dot checked, this meaning the object is checked or not, right? So we can check to see if it's checked, if this box is checked. But the problem is that anything with this in it is only going to last inside of here, right? So we need a reference. Remember how we did this last time. If I get a reference to the checkbox, so let checkbox, right, equal to this. This checkbox is going to give me a jQuery HTML element. It's going to return this, right? A reference to the checkbox. And then when I change it on change, I can respond to it if I want, right? I can respond to it if I want. But I don't really need to do the event, do I? Not really, right? Because if you think about it, right, I should be able to check to see if it's checked, right? So let's do down here, console log, checkbox dot, I want to see checkbox by itself. And what I get, this is the checkbox that I'm getting from my log. Let's just undo this one. We don't care about what's happening here right now. So we're just going through this because, you may not, we've never done a checkbox, so we have no idea. And notice that I'm getting without even being checked, I can see that I've got a checkbox, right? And if I scroll down, right, then I have class name and I have checked. Checked is actually a property that exists on a checkbox, right? It exists. So I can check to see if it's checked. So all I need is a reference to my subscribe checkbox, which is really what I do. I don't really need a change event because I'm not making anything happen when I'm checking it on or not. So grab this, go down in here, and we can do an if. We can say if this subscribe checkbox dot checked, if that's true, then only then do we want to create contact list and all this kind of stuff. Otherwise, we're just going to do the regular send that we normally do. We're going to send the information on, and we don't need this at all. Let's see if this is true, and we'll just try and add another person and see if it doesn't go to the list. So it shouldn't go now. So we'll say a new person we're going to send to the list. And let's take a look at our application. All right, here's our application, right? And I want to do a person that I want to send to the list. For example, let's say Doug Small, right? Doug Small, is phone number is 416-556-5556, right? And his email address is doug@small.com, right? And we're not going to check the subscribe to our contact list checkbox and click send, and Doug does not get sent. But what if I wanted Doug to be on our list, or someone else, another superhero that we can possibly think of, that we want in here, right? So let's think about someone else. Well, we'll put someone else. We'll put James Bond. He's kind of a superhero, right? In some ways. So we can say James Bond, he's kind of a superhero, and his number is 416-556-5556. His email address is james.bonds007@example.com, right? And we want to subscribe him to the list. So we click send, and if we have everything good, then we should have James Bond in here. But we have this that happened. We have an extra line here, right? But somehow we have a problem, and it didn't go, right? It didn't go anymore. So that when I checked it, as an example, if it's checked, when I look through this, my contacts, I made a new contact, and I get my full name, value, and all this kind of stuff. Uh-oh, full name doesn't really exist. And then I wanted to make a full name, a contact number, wait, contact number doesn't exist. Email address doesn't exist somehow, right? These things don't exist anymore when I did this. Do you notice that? But what I ended up getting in my application was an empty entry. See? But that's funny because I didn't even get this. So I don't have anything that got in. Where is James Bond? He didn't get added in. So did I do something wrong? Is my subscribe checkbox checked? All right. So That's what this checks. First, I'm going to go click, and then if this is checked, then I want to do something. So what did I do wrong? Update the Boolean. So, okay, here it is. If this checked, create a Boolean for memory, update the Boolean based on the check status. Well, this is the Boolean, right? It exists or not. And if I go out here and in console log it, console log this. I want to see if it's true or false. So console log this. If we get an undefined, that would be a bad thing, right? If we get an undefined, that would be a bad thing. And we're going to get an undefined, and I'll talk about why in a second. So I go back to console log, it's undefined. So why is this undefined? Remember what JQuery does, guys. JQuery looks for all elements, right? So if I want to do this, then we get into funny syntax. And this is where, sometimes JavaScript is just a little bit easier to understand. What I'm really saying is I want to look for the first element where I have a subscribe checkbox, right? That's what I want to do. And if I was to save this now, you can see that that's false, right? And that's why this is a funny way of doing things. Because this, remember what this really is in the background? Query selector all. Hey, query selector all. I want you to find all elements. Well, let's look at the first element that's checked, right? That's why this is a weird syntax. And if you think about this, if you look at this, this is very unreadable compared to writing something that looks like JavaScript, like we did before, where we said something like if, something like document.getElement by ID, the subscribe checkbox, right? And if I said checked, because you can chain it, or like this, if I said I want to do this and I want to console log this, okay, so this is a little longer than this, but document get element by ID subscribe checkbox checked. Is it checked? Let's see what that does. Does it actually do what I want it to do? Yes, it does. So this is equivalent to, for the most part, this. This is a little shorter but less readable because of this silliness. Okay, so I'm just pointing this out, and that's why this failed. This failed because this is looking at the entire list of objects that match this selector. Okay, the way I put it. That's what it does. So are there other ways to do it? Yes, there are, but we're going to go with JQuery. We're going to try and stick to JQuery, not JavaScript, just because that's the exercise today. So we need to just insert those little things in here, and that's one way of doing it. If it's checked, then let's add James Bond. Let's try this now. So James Bond 416-556-5556 5007. How about that? And then James.Bond 007 at example.com. Right? And we're going to kind of add that person onto the list, subscribe them, right? And then click send, and there he is. Okay. And when we go to our contact list, there he is. Okay. So we're good to go. So it's only going to add it in if I have the checkbox. And now our contact form makes sense. Before I was like, we're adding everything to the list, but I'm just sending a contact. I'm asking for some information. Now it makes more sense that we're doing it this way. Let's put this up to GitHub. So again, control backtick. I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m added checkbox, subscribe checkbox. Oh. To contact list. It's actually the contact, but anyways. All right, so that's it. So that's pushing it up. Okay, cool. So we've got a mechanism now to add only things that I check that people want to subscribe to. So that's what this mechanism is. Okay, which makes sense. And it didn't make sense before because I was always adding everybody onto the list. As long as you did it, you're on the list. And I don't think you need to be on the list unless you subscribe, right? Okay, now back to the contact list. What I want to do with the contact list is add a couple of additional fields, and I want to add 2 more table headers. All right, so 1, 2. I'm doing this on the HTML side. Okay, two more table headers. And now what it's going to look like is a little bit weird, right? Because we have 2 more table headers here, but we have no table headers here or table columns here. Let's add those in. And the columns that get added in have to be added in through HTML, through JavaScript. So going back to our contact, our app.js, and we're going to go down to our contact list where I have these TDs. I need to add in a couple of more TDs. Just for now, let's make them empty. So I'm just making room for my edit button and my delete button. Okay, edit and then delete. So let's put those values in there. So edit and delete, right? Those are 2 buttons that I'm going to put in. And you can see now that I've got edit and delete in there, but let's make them buttons, right? So what I want in here instead is a button that gives me edit or delete, right? And the button, is it going to really be a button? Yes, I could make it a button. I could also make it an anchor tag. It really depends on how you want to do this. Let's make it a button for now. So I'll say button, and inside a button this is the interesting part. I need to get a reference for this button, but for now let's just make a class, the button with a class of button and then button dash primary as an example. So that's what I want. So button primary, and I can't do that here because it won't pick it up. Emmet won't pick this up. Let's do that just down here. So I want this to be something that I want to do. And actually, let's use an HTML. Let's do it in HTML so I can get everything written properly. I can write it by myself, but I'm lazy. Let's do it here. In my contact list, I'm just going to put that in there. Right? There's my button primary. I'm just setting it up here, and then I'm going to send it back to. I'm just writing it here, so I get help to write it. And then an anchor tag, an I tag with the class of SAS, and then I want a pencil. So some kind of edit pencil. So let's go back to Font Awesome. And in Font Awesome, I want something that is an edit. So if I look edit, there's like the pencil edit, a user edit, depending on what you want, one of these buttons. So let's add this in. So I want to use FA edit. All right, so that's what I want in here. And it's going to say edit. I need a space. This is where the space does work. So I want to take this whole thing, and let's make the other one too. Let's make the other button while we're at it, because I want to edit and I want delete. So for delete, it's actually going to do button warning or button danger, one of the two. Because basically, if I'm deleting, it should be red. I shouldn't allow this to happen. And instead of FA edit, it's probably going to be trash, if I'm not wrong. So delete. There's a trash can. There's trash alt, this one, or trash alt, this one, right? Or a trash can, wherever you prefer. Or you can also go the minus circle or delete. These are all symbols that make sense. Let's use the trash can just to make it so it's nice. And it says FAS FA trash dash alt. So cool. Grab that. And then just replace this with that. Put a delete in there, right? Which is what we want this to do. We're not going to leave these buttons here inside of our contact list, though. We want to put these buttons inside of only for each of the elements that we put in the page. So let's grab this, cut it for now, and go into our app.js. And then inside where it says delete, we're just going to put that button in there. And edit. And then inside where it says delete, going back to the contact list, I want to grab this thing we were practicing with, and just to get our code hinting and everything else going, I'm going back into app.js and put that in there. Okay, save it. And we're going to talk about this. We're not done because this is not complete, right? And going back to my contact list, just take away some white space so that just for completeness. And when I go back out to my list, I have something that looks like this now. Why are there many of them? Because it's going to do one button, a delete button, and a trash button. Oh, sorry, an edit button and a delete button for each of the objects. I think they're too big, so we can make some improvements. So instead of going to, let's go back to our app.js. Instead of FAS FA edit, we're going to make it FA small, FA-small, because I think that's just better. Small buttons, right? I think that's how you do it. Let's make it so that there are different size classes. Regular, light. This is size 2x. This is size 3x. What is the regular size? In the wild, 9752. There's size classes. Hold on a second. Icons. Let's go to docs. And I want to go in docs. Sorry, I just want to make sure I do this right. Style is regular. And I want to do, I know large, but I can't remember how to do small. Is it SM? I think it's SM. FASM. Yeah, I thought I did that, right? FA-SM. I guess it's not, I want to make it extra small. So maybe it's XS or extra small. Extra small. Yeah. That actually does the button. So let's go back to small. And I also have to do the size for my button. So button primary, and then button dash small. I think I want to do that too. I think that's what I'm looking for. Not just for the symbol, but also for the button. So something that looks like this, a little bit smaller than what we had before, because I think it was just too big. Like the buttons were too big, right? One thing I also want to do is center these because they're not centered inside of this thing. And we want to center the items in the TD. So we want to do that. We want to look at Bootstrap for that. So if I go to forms, if I go to tables, which is a content under tables, and we can see that there are variants of tables, headings. You can see that there's different colors we can use, accented tables, and a bunch of stuff. Hoverable rows, which is what we kind of did, and active versus other kinds of tables. I want to change the table header to center, and I think it's just like text center, but I want to make sure that that's true or not. So small tables, vertical alignment, vertical align nesting. I think it's text center. I'm just looking at this here. Handles, revising tables, always responsive, breakpoint specific. There's a ton of stuff here. I think it's text center. Let's just go and try it. So, so in the TD, we can put a class of text dash center. Let's see if I just do it on one, if it does anything. Yep. Sorry, it's just it's memory. I'm trying to remember that. So that is the way it's done. So it looks nice. This is the whole thing. It looks really complex and long, but actually all I'm doing is I'm coding it, and I'm also styling it all at the same time, right? So that's why it looks kind of like centered and here and everything else, right? So I've got these buttons, but right now they don't do anything, but they should do something different every time I hook onto them, right? And they're buttons right now. Each of them is a button. But the effect that I want for the button is I want to create an event listener for each of the buttons that I've created in my on the form. So the buttons all work differently. Okay, so this is something that I'm gonna leave you here. I've kind of set it up because we're running out of time. but how do I make an event listener listen to what I'm thinking here, okay? That actually looks at the ID that I've got in here. Here's the ID, right? And then I can delete the object that's in here, right? So an event listener for this button. In fact, there's a couple ways to do this, right? I can make a special ID for the button based on the index that I'm looking at, right? So the button index, the number, think about it as a, and there's different ways to do that later on. We'll do it differently, but I want to do an index that has that maintains that index inside of an ID. That's what I want to do. And because once I do that, right, button number, whatever, or delete 1, delete 2, edit 1, edit 2, this kind of stuff. Edit button 1, edit button 2, edit button 3. Whatever the edit button is, I want to make each of those have separate event listeners. Okay, that's what I want to do. And each of the event listeners, depending on which button I'm choosing, as an example, doesn't matter which one, I want to delete the index that it has, right? So I could do that, Nicholas. Yeah, that's cool. So I could do something that looks the same. So I could say that TD, but it's for the button itself that's clicked. So it's got to be in here. So button ID is equal to, right? And I can put these in there because we can use question marks quotation marks inside of backticks, no problem, just like we've done here. And then in here, I want to inject this inside of here. That's definitely what I want to do, but it can't be this because what about for my delete button, right? So this is going to also be for my delete button because my delete button also is going to look at that specific field that I want to do. I want to edit one. I want to delete something else, all right? So yeah, this is neat and all for my ID, but I also had to have some other kind of marks. So for example, it might be something like edit button dash and then the ID, right? So delete button dash and then the ID. So this is kind of the way I can put it into place, right, for each one of these things. And that does each of the items in my list. But again, this just, if I look and inspect elements now, let's inspect this element. So I can just inspect. It'll take me right to that element. It actually does that. Edit button 1, button primary, button small, and then da-da-da. That's what it does. So that's when I look at a button itself. If I, let's say, inspect this one, this should be 7, right? If I inspect this one. So it should say delete button 7, whatever. And that gives me specific information about the item that I'm deleting, right? 7 is what I'm looking for. So it really depends on the ID that I'm polling for, okay? That's something that I can do. It's one way of doing it. Can you guys think of other ways? And by the way, we've timed out, but can you think of other ways to identify? So I'm identifying each of these buttons, yeah, no problem. But each of these buttons is going to be related to the ID, as an example that I have. I could just say, who cares, right? When I click on a delete button, I want to look at its ID, right? What other attributes could I set up, right? Can a button have other attributes? A data attribute, I like that a lot, right? So I could have data that each of the buttons hold. So instead of an ID, then I can have data, right? And instead of making an edit button, that might be easier to do what Nick said, which is something that looks like this. So data is equal to this, right? Can I do a custom attribute like that, like a custom data attribute or something else? Is that allowable, right? And if I do an inspect, so let's save this. And then if I go to inspect this, so inspect, then I have data is equal to 1, right? Inspect data is equal to 3. Is that even a possibility? Can I put my own custom tags in here? Do they mean anything, as an example? And how does that mess things up? If I click any one of these, nothing happens right now. But I'm going to leave you with this thought. So if I do this, and then This is still inside my if statement. I want to, as I'm adding, remember I'm in a for loop already, right? So I might as well add the event listener as I'm going. So down in here in the event listener, I want to tag the button that I've just added for my, my IDs, right? My edit button and my delete button. I want to tag these buttons, right, with a data of 1, right? This button. How do I do that? I don't have an ID, right? But I could add, or I can add listeners for all of them at once, right? Because each one of them might have a class. I can make a special class called edit button. All of them can share the same class, right? Or I can look for FA edit, right? FA edit or FA trash. I can look for something that's already in the class somewhere inside the button, right? So, or button primary and button danger. There's maybe only 2 buttons that are in here right now. I could do those things, but I think the better way to do it is to make a custom class, right, for the buttons. One of them is, edit dash, an edit and a delete. So I can say edit in here. So a class of edit, a class of delete. Let's see if hopefully delete and edit don't mean anything in our things, in our examples. So let's see if that does. So they're still good. Edit and delete don't mean anything. Again, if I was to inspect this button here, inspect, then you're going to see that I have a class of button, button primary, button small, edit. Okay. Again, remember what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out a way of attaching an event listener to each of these things, right? So I can say something like, hey, JQuery, let's use JQuery, we're using JQuery, right? Hey, JQuery, I want to find a all objects that have a class of edit, right? All objects that have a class of edit, I want to run on event listener, right? So on click, right? And I want to console log this object, right? By the way, I can't do this. I have to, not like this, sorry. Edit, click, function. That's what I got to do, right? Because the callback function is this. I got to say something like, I want to console log the the object that I'm looking at, right? Dot data, right? The object that I'm looking at dot data. So this object dot data, right? If that's possible, right? Let's just do one and see if that works, right? Console log, right? So no. Okay, so none of this worked, but let's just do edit all objects that have on click that have an edit class, right? I could say all buttons with an edit class to make it more specific, right? And what about if I just want to say edit click, just to make sure that that works? So I'll say edit clicked. Okay, so still not hooking, right? So button edit, button with a class of edit doesn't compute, right? Somehow. Why is that, guys? A button with a class of edit doesn't compute. As I'm adding it, I can add it here or I can add it after the fact. Because look, contact list inner HTML as data has never been added until this point. Adding it here, the buttons doesn't actually exist. I have to add it after the contact list has been added here, as an example. All right, so let's try that now. That's good, it works. So I can see a button with an edit. And now let's print out the dot this. So let's try this out. So I want to say, I want to just print out this item, right? So let's see what that does. So yes, I can do that for this button, right? Here's the information. My length is thing. I go down here. I want to look at a data attribute if it exists. I got data sets, but this is every button, right? Not just one button. Okay, what if I said this and 0? Again, that's why I'm saying I'm leaving you with this, because we're not going to finish. This dot 0, right? Then I have a button. That's the actual button itself that says edit with the data that is 6. Let's print out the data now, right? And I click on a button and it says undefined. So that's where I was going to go with it, because we need to figure out how to get that value back, right? All right, what about if it's not data, but actually it's a value, right? What if I put it in the value area? Because value can be something I put in there as well, right? So I click this button and I want to get the value. Now it's easy, val of the item, right? 4, 7, 10. Guys, we're onto something here. We're onto something here, right? So this creates the event listener and it has references to the value. So when I press edit, I have something that'll happen. It'll take me to some page, right, that I want, and it'll pass into that page information that I want to pass into it. I don't have a page yet. I don't have an edit page. I need an edit page, right? That's what I need. But what about my delete? The delete is the simplest thing ever, right? So I can do the same thing for the delete. Edit needs more work, right? But my delete, so any button that has a delete in it, if I click on it, I want to get the value of the delete. So, okay, there's 5. There's 1. Cool. Well, what I want to do is I want to remove item. So from my storage. So remember that local storage, right? And then I want to remove item, and I want to add in the item that I want to put in. Okay, the item that is the key, which is a string. So I want to say whatever this dot value is, I want to remove, right? That's what I want to do. But if I did this, there's a couple of problems that we're going to deal with next week, right? I want to show you what the problem is. Let's remove James Bond for a second. So I go through and I click on delete, right? And I'm deleting James Bond. But what I need also to do when I'm deleting, I also have to refresh the screen. Even if I've deleted him, it's still going to show up here. Nothing's going to actually look like something's happening, right? Because if I click the delete button, he's going to be deleted from local storage, but I'm still going to show up here. So I need to refresh the screen. So how do I refresh the screen with JavaScript? How do I go back and navigate to the screen, right? So I want to navigate to to another link in JavaScript, right? So I want to do, how do I get the browser to navigate to a URL? Well, there's this thing, location.href, and whatever it is. So I could do that. I could say that after I remove item, I want to do location. That's the location from the window location. We're going to learn later. .href, which takes me to where I want to go. And then I say where I want to go back to, which is contact-list, right? .html. And what this is going to do is refresh the page, right? Because I want to be able to do a refresh when I delete something or when I edit something, right? So that's what this is going to do. But this is going to immediately delete this thing, immediately delete the object. And it's also going to leave a gap inside of my local storage. My IDs are going to be all messed up. They're not going to be in order anymore, right? But it really doesn't matter, does it? Okay, let's see what happens. So yeah, Nick says his list doesn't even show up anymore. Okay, what happens if I click delete? Well, now it's gone, right? See that? How it deleted it immediately, right? And if I look at my application storage, you can see that certainly James Bond is gone. So I deleted it immediately and refreshed the screen, okay? But now I have a gap, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I deleted this one. But what if I delete someone like Stephen Strange? Bam, now I'm in trouble. Now I'm in trouble, right? I deleted something in the middle and I have an error, right? My error says cannot read property split of null, right? That is a problem. Why? Because in my application, the way I've coded it, and this is what we're going to fix next week, right? I'm missing a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is missing. Let's put them back in. So we'll add new. We'll call it 5, and we'll put him back in so he appears. I'll show you why he can appear. So Stephen Strange 416-555-5559, I think it would be, and then Dr. Strange at example.com. Refresh, and now we're good. We're back to normal again. Here's my Stephen Strange. It was number 5 that was missing, but I deleted this one. Bad things happen. If I delete the last one, who cares? Because the last one is in order, right? That is a problem, my problem, that I have to deal with because of the way that I have looped through everything. For index 0 to local storage length, as an example is what I'm doing, okay? So we have to figure out next week a different way of looping in order for us to remove items. So we're going to put a to-do in here. To-do, need to fix this item. To-do, we need a to-do here too. We need to create an edit page, right? Because that's what this needs to be done. We also need to check. We don't want to just delete like we did, and we can check to see if we want to delete it by using some kind of confirm. So I confirm, sorry, I know I'm timing out here, but I confirm basically says, are you sure? Are you sure? And if confirm is true, right? If my confirm is true, then I want to remove it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do anything. So I confirm is actually a little message that pops up. So if I was to go back to this, let's just refresh the page to make sure. And I want to delete Wanda. If I click delete, there's going to be a message that comes up that says, are you sure? If I press cancel, nothing happens. If I try and delete her again and press OK, then she's gone. That is a good step, right? Because if we don't do, the delete, then what's going to happen, or we don't check, then we can just delete any item in our list, and there's no check for us to do that. So we need some issue. We need some fixing here from what we're doing. So this is what we have to do, but we need to fix this item because it breaks. This is our notes to ourselves. It breaks when we delete a middle item, right? That's what happens. And we can't do edit unless we have an edit page. That's it for today. I'm going to do clear git add dot git commit -m. We'll say started CRUD on contact list page. CRUD again is create, read, update, delete, git push. That's what it stands for. All right, any questions? I know we've gone over time. Any questions around what we talked about today? Again, this is all part of your in-class exercise number 3. It's a big one. Please take some screenshots of some of your code, especially the checkbox that you would have inside of your on the contact page, right? You want to have the checkbox here. You also definitely want to take a snapshot of this because we added in the edit and delete. This is your practice. We're practicing a couple things at the same time. We're practicing creating HTML pages. We're practicing, using JavaScript to inject content, which is what we're doing here with all this. We're injecting content here. We're practicing how to create events, that can do different things to our page in in a dynamic way with JavaScript. All right, we're doing it like that. Okay. All right, that's it, guys. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Remember that that this week your lab 1 is due. Please don't forget to do your lab 1. It's worth 15% of your final grade, so please make sure you get it done, or your midterm will look very bad. if you don't get your lab 1 done. Remember, lab 1 is to be done in groups. You cannot do lab 1 unless you register for a group. And if you haven't done so already, please do so ASAP. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'll take any questions that anyone else here has.